In turn, the indignant Chief Justice, taking counsel of his passion instead of his patriotism, announced dogmatically that "the President, under the Constitution and laws of the United States, cannot suspend the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus, nor authorize any military officer to do so," and some weeks afterward filed a long written opinion in support of this dictum. It is unnecessary here to quote the opinions of several eminent jurists who successfully refuted his labored argument, nor to repeat the vigorous analysis with which, in his special message to Congress of July 4, President Lincoln vindicated his own authority. While these events were occurring in Maryland and Virginia, the remaining slave states were gradually taking sides, some for, others against rebellion. Under radical and revolutionary leadership, similar to that of the Cotton States, the governors and state officials of North Carolina, Tennessee, and Arkansas placed their states in an attitude of insurrection, and before the middle of May practically joined them to the Confederate government by the formalities of military leagues and secession ordinances. But in the border slave states, that is, those contiguous to the free states, the eventual result was different. In these, though secession intrigue and sympathy were strong, and though their governors and state officials favored the rebellion, the underlying loyalty and unionism of the people thwarted their revolutionary schemes. This happened even in the northwestern part of Virginia itself. The 48 counties of that state lying north of the Alleghanies and adjoining Pennsylvania and Ohio repudiated the action at Richmond, seceded from secession, and established a loyal provisional state government. President Lincoln recognized them and sustained them with military aid, and in due time they became organized and admitted to the Union as the State of West Virginia. In Delaware, though some degree of secession feeling existed, it was too insignificant to produce any noteworthy public demonstration. In Kentucky the political struggle was deep and prolonged. The governor twice called the legislature together to initiate secession proceedings, but that body refused compliance and warded off his scheme by voting to maintain the state neutrality. Next, the governor sought to utilize the military organization known as the State Guard to effect his object. The Union leaders offset this movement by enlisting several volunteer Union regiments. At the June election, 9 Union congressmen were chosen, and only 1 secessionist, while in August a new legislature was elected with a 3/4 Union majority in each branch. Other secession intrigues proved equally abortive, and when, finally, in September, Confederate armies invaded Kentucky at 3 different points, the Kentucky legislature invited the Union armies of the West into the state to expel them, and voted to place 40,000 Union volunteers at the service of President Lincoln. In Missouri the struggle was more fierce, but also more brief. As far back as January the conspirators had perfected a scheme to obtain possession, through the treachery of the officer in charge, of the important Jefferson Barracks arsenal at St. Louis, with its store of 60,000 stand of arms and 1.5 million cartridges. The project, however, failed. Rumors of the danger came to General Scott, who ordered thither a company of regulars under the command of Captain Nathaniel Lyon, an officer not only loyal by nature and habit, but also imbued with strong anti-slavery convictions. Lyon found valuable support in the watchfulness of a Union Safety Committee, composed of leading St. Louis citizens, who secretly organized a number of Union regiments, recruited largely from the heavy German population. And from these sources Lyon was enabled to make such a show of available military force as effectively to deter any mere popular uprising to seize the arsenal. A state convention, elected to pass a secession ordinance, resulted, unexpectedly to the conspirators, in the return of a majority of Union delegates, who voted down the secession program and adjourned to the following December. Thereupon the secession governor ordered his state militia into temporary camps of instruction, with the idea of taking Missouri out of the Union by a concerted military movement. One of these encampments, established at St. Louis and named Camp Jackson in honor of the governor, furnished such unquestionable evidences of intended treason that Captain Lyon, whom President Lincoln had meanwhile authorized to enlist 10,000 Union volunteers, and if necessary to proclaim martial law, made a sudden march upon Camp Jackson with his regulars and 6 of his newly enlisted regiments, stationed his force in commanding positions around the camp, and demanded its surrender. The demand was complied with after but slight hesitation, and the captured militia regiments were, on the following day, disbanded under parole. Unfortunately, as the prisoners were being marched away, a secession mob insulted and attacked some of Lyon's regiments and provoked a return fire, in which about 20 persons, mainly lookers on, were killed or wounded. And for a day or two the city was thrown into the panic and lawlessness of a reign of terror. Upon this, the legislature, in session at Jefferson City, the capital of the state, with a 3/4 secession majority, rushed through the forms of legislation a military bill placing the military and financial resources of Missouri under the governor's control. For a month longer various incidents delayed the culmination of the approaching struggle, each side continuing its preparations and constantly accentuating the rising antagonism. The crisis came when, on June 11th, Governor Jackson and Captain Lyon, now made brigadier general by the President, met in an interview at St. Louis. In this interview the governor demanded that he be permitted to exercise sole military command to maintain the neutrality of Missouri, while Lyon insisted that the federal military authority must be left in unrestricted control. It being impossible to reach any agreement, Governor Jackson hurried back to his capital, burning railroad bridges behind him as he went, and on the following day, June 12th, issued his proclamation calling out 50,000 state militia and denouncing the Lincoln administration as "an unconstitutional military despotism." Lyon was also prepared for this contingency. On the afternoon of June 13th he embarked with a regular battery and several battalions of his Union volunteers on steamboats, moved rapidly up the Missouri River to Jefferson City, drove the governor and the secession legislature into precipitate flight, took possession of the capital, and, continuing his expedition, scattered, after a slight skirmish, a small rebel military force which had hastily collected at Booneville. Rapidly following these events, the loyal members of the Missouri State Convention, which had in February refused to pass a secession ordinance, were called together, and passed ordinances under which was constituted a loyal state government that maintained the local civil authority of the United States throughout the greater part of Missouri during the whole of the Civil War, only temporarily interrupted by invasions of transient Confederate armies from Arkansas. It will be seen from the foregoing outline that the original hope of the Southern leaders to make the Ohio River the northern boundary of their slave empire was not realized. They indeed secured the adhesion of Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Arkansas, by which the territory of the Confederate States government was enlarged nearly 1/3, and its population and resources nearly doubled. But the northern tier of slave states, Maryland, West Virginia, Kentucky, and Missouri, not only decidedly refused to join the rebellion, but remained true to the Union, and this reduced the contest to a trial of military strength between 11 states with 5,115,790 whites and 3,508,131 slaves, against 24 states with 21,600,000